Let us pray. Kind, gracious, merciful Father, we're indeed thankful for not only your faithfulness, but your holiness. Father, we continue in prayer this afternoon with sin on our minds and thy holiness as we strive to be more like thee every day. We pray, Father, that as we read and study thy word, that we absorb it, apply to our minds, our hearts. Let thy word and thy Son's example shine as a beacon in our lives, that we might endeavor to be closer, drawn to thee, giving the world an example, not only by example, but Father, as we live our lives, that we reach out to those who are around us, spreading thy gospel and thy truth as we live our lives. Father, as we open our Bibles this evening, we pray that we do it with an open mind, with an attitude that is worthy of thy Son. We pray, Father, that as we absorb what we're taught, that we might apply it in our lives as we leave this building tonight. It is through Christ we can pray these things. Amen.
Okay. Just some reflection on the class that we had with the youth over here with evangelism. I think what I took most from the class and what I appreciated about it was how hands-on it was. We sat down in a lot of groups, and there were members who were older who were kind of running those groups, like Mom was with the ladies, me and CJ, Matt. And as we were doing that, we were kind of role-playing, mock studying with people. And what kind of came to my attention was a lot of questions that come up during Bible studies are usually, if you don't have a lot of Bible studies, are usually kind of zingers. They catch you off guard, and I think that's what people are most afraid of. And I think with the youth, when you pose those kind of questions, they might not have heard that question before. And I think being in the church, you hear really, really sound teaching, and that's good. That's what we want. We want sound teaching, but you also have to be able to think and reason through confusing doctrine, especially if you're studying with people. So I think what was best about the class was that we were sitting down in groups, we had the Bible open, we were discussing with people who were able to throw questionable ideas or questions out there and make people think. And I don't know if that's how the youth, what they took from it, but that's what I thought was really, really good about it. And reflecting at it now and saying what could we do to possibly help that even more, I think if the youth had everybody in the congregation involved, because I grew up in Bible studies with my dad. My father did a lot of Bible studies with people and would have us with him just listening. So I heard a lot of arguments and a lot of discussion that wasn't necessarily right, and how to reason through that through my entire life. And I think if you're not used to doing that on a regular basis, or if you haven't had that kind of background, you need a group of people who are willing to do that with you. If you don't have the ability, or you don't feel like you have the ability to study with people, the youth need people like us to study with those around us so that they can partake and listen and hear those kinds of studies going on. But that's essentially what I took from the class, and I appreciated Matt when he did that. So thank you.
I appreciate very much what he just said about the having a group going with you, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But in my opinion, I don't really think that the material we're going to discuss in this class is all that difficult, at least on an intellectual level. But the action that's connected with it can be very difficult, the action that's required from it. I think it's kind of easy to sit down and study what God has to say about how you handle sin among your brethren, or what the gospel is and why we need to teach the lost, etc. But to take that knowledge and understanding and actually apply it, actually put it to use and use it for what it was meant for, can be very difficult, at least in my opinion. And what I reflect on most from our young adult class, especially coming from me personally, my background being that I didn't grow up in the church, I don't have any formal Bible training, Bible schooling, however you want to put that, is a very nervous thing for me to even consider really going out of my way to try and set up Bible studies with people, especially strangers. And so that was something I had a lot of nervousness with, and I think a lot of these guys that have been through the school or any other kind of schooling, even they'll tell you that they're still nervous sometimes to talk to people or to reach out to strangers. And the young adult group that we had, or that we have, are very motivated, and we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different relationships within our lives that we want to seek out and try to share the gospel with, help bring more souls to Christ. And seeing these many different people that they have their own people in their own lives, but they deal with the same kind of struggles, the same having issues within family that are wayward, or family that are just not Christians at all, and they deal with those same kind of struggles. And I think it takes a lot of encouragement to handle these things we're going to talk about, and having a group like this together that is motivated to do it, that has that same determination, that same love for each other and love for those that they want to reach. Doing it together is very powerful, both individually on each and every one of us, and also as a group in our mission. And that's probably what I took most from our class. And I think we have several young adults that are very motivated and determined to reach this goal. So.
Thank you, John and CJ. We can go ahead and start passing these out. From what John and CJ just were talking about with these classes, I want to back up a little bit. Some of you were in Brother BJ's class. If you don't get one of these, let me know and I'll get you a copy. If you got a family, take one, and if you need another copy, let me know a little bit later on. But try to get them passed out at least to the level to where everybody can look on for now. If a little over a year ago, I came to John and to CJ and said, hey, look, I'm going to start a class. And it's not just a class, it's a series of classes. And it's not just classes, but hopefully it's a movement for us to be livened up and to do things a little bit differently. And it's going to start with the teenagers, and then it's going to go to young adults, and then it's going to go to the adults. And I want to explain that to you adults who are in here tonight, particularly, why that is and what we're doing here. I went to spend a day with Alan Webster and ask him, and of course he taught me the gospel, and I have a lot of respect for him. And I kind of laid my entire work out to him and asked him what I needed to do with this work. And he said some things to me that resounded with me. He didn't say teach a series of classes, but what it all came down to in the end was there's all kind of programs you can start at a church. And they'll get people excited and they'll get people going for a little while until the program gets old, and then the program will die, and then you'll have to start a new program. And basically what I did was I took Alan's advice to me, and one of the strongest things he said, teach as much as you can, teach classes. And I said, well, hold on a minute. How about we take this concept of evangelism, we mix it with teaching? The strongest thing we can do is really dig into God's Word and understand what God's Word says about evangelism. And then, moreover, from that, start doing some things about it. I heard a quote the other day. A preacher said, the only part of the Bible that you truly believe is the part of the Bible that you enact in your life. And there's some truth to that. I can say all day long that I believe in evangelism. But if I'm not an evangelist, then I don't believe in Mark 16, 15, and 16. I can say I believe it. There's a tract out. Does Mark 16, 16 belong in the Bible? And yes, it does. It does belong in the Bible. But the question is it really in my Bible, and do I really believe it? But if we back up from that and understand why teach the teenagers and then the young adults and then come to the adults, and there's a reason for that. When you teach a teenager, most teenagers, if they're spiritually right, if they're right with the Lord, and most of these guys, they got their eyes open, they got this twinkle in their eye, they got this energy. You don't have to convince a teenager to have energy and to have love and to have trust. You don't have to teach a teenager to do that. They've got that. So you start with the teenagers, right? And these teenagers, I'm telling you, almost every hand went up. At the end of that class, we said, who here, when the young adults and the adults are looking for study partners, who here is willing to be a silent partner in a Bible study? Almost every single hand went up. So when we get to the adult class here right now, look, the buck stops here. It stops with the adults, okay? It's not on the teenagers what we're going to do about sin as a congregation. It's not on them. It's on the adults what we're going to do about sin as a congregation. But we know this. The teenagers have studied how to do Bible studies, and the teenagers are eager and willing to go along with the adults on Bible studies. We move up to the young adults, and the teenagers taught me something. There's another reason for this. Why start at the teens and move your way up? This is the most important class, the class for the adults. This is the most, everything's built up to this. This is, my hope was every member of the congregation would be in this class with us. Because to me, this is the most important class. It's as adults that are members of this congregation, what are we going to do when it comes to sin? And the teenagers had to teach me some things. And one thing I learned from that teenager class was we're starting in the wrong place if we talk about evangelism when we start with the world. Evangelism does not start with people are lost out there. And the reason that so often we hear sermons about evangelism or we go to seminars about evangelism and we don't actually start evangelism is because we start with they're lost. But we need to start with am I lost? We start with they have sins, but what we need to start with is what sins do I have? We start with they're lost, but we got to ask this question, but who among us is lost? They have sins, yes, but what sins are being allowed to live within the church? And so the class changed from the teenage class to the young adult class from evangelism to what to do about sin. And then in that time period, I learned a lot from the young adults, and especially from the last several months with the young adults, in which we've been working on a project that I'm just extremely excited about, that, 20-something people, I guess, overall over the course of time have contributed to. In how to reach out to people who are wayward and people who have never been Christians. I learned a lot from that, and it came down to this, and Greg Menger was saying, what's the title of your class? What's the title of your class? And it's the seriousness of sin. That can't be anything but that. Because what you see over and over again among Christians, certainly in the world, what you see over and over again is people take sin and they play with it. Individuals take a certain part of their life in which they're sinning and they segment it off and they pretend, as long as I say my prayers at night, I can keep this pet sin. Individuals do that. Congregations of God people sometimes see a sin that's occurring within the congregation, or they see a brother or sister that is straying off and we let them go. Or we overlook that sin because I don't want to have to deal with it. But then a man comes in and tells us, hey, you got to go out in the world and address sin. And you say, I don't even address sin in my life. How am I going to go address sin with this brother or sister or out in the world? You say, you got to go out in the world and address sin. You say, we don't address sin among ourselves. How are we going to go out in the world and address sin? And so the class took on a different meaning. The young adult class enlivened me. It taught me some things. It really encouraged me as we move forward into this adult class, which is what? We need to study and understand the seriousness of sin in ourselves, in our brothers and sisters, and then in the world. That's our goal. And as John and as CJ pointed out, it's got to be active, it's got to be hands-on. This is not going to be a lecture class. There's going to be some nights where we have lecture-style teaching, but this is going to be a class in which we have workshops. We have nights we come in here and we have workshop time. We have sit down and deal with this sin problem. At PTP, Glenn Colley does elder workshops where he gives you a problem. He says, you get together, form groups. He gives you a problem. Here's the situation. What are you going to do about it? We're going to do that in here. As we get into that part about helping a brother or sister not to sin, that's what we're going to do. We're going to give a problem. We're going to talk about what you're going to do about it. And then we're going to cover the Scriptures and let the Scriptures indicate what should my answer have been. And let different people produce their results and what they say they would do about it based upon the Scriptures. All that is looking forward to what we're going to be doing in here. As we get later in time, we're going to break up and we're going to do Bible studies. Just the way the teenagers did it, we're going to break up and do Bible studies, but we're going to have adults with a teenager silent partner. Some adults say, I'm not going to be a Bible study leader. That's okay. We're going to have some adults that are silent partners. That's all right. We're going to have some willing to be the leaders and some willing to be silent partners. We're going to have some saying, hey, look, I'll be the person who you're teaching. That's okay. But we're going to work together because, as CJ aptly pointed out, none of this is difficult in theory. We can all leave here every Wednesday night saying, that's right, sin is bad. But the key is what? Will this class and the study that I do in this class, will it lead to action in my life? Will it lead to people who are lost coming home? People who were once knew the truth coming home? Will it lead to people who never knew the truth, learning the truth and being added to the church? That's the purpose of this class. If that doesn't happen, it doesn't matter how much we learn. If we come in here and learn a whole bunch, and nothing changes with people who are wayward, and nothing changes with sins that might exist among our brothers and sisters, and nothing changes with lost people in the world coming home, then this class is a complete failure. If all we do is become a library, this is a failure. Tonight's purpose, and you've got this handout, is to introduce the problem. The only reason we can have this class is because sin exists. And so it's an introduction to sin. Who is sin? And the main thing I want you to get from this, I hope you'll take these handouts home, and if you don't have one, you'll tell me so I can go run off the number we need and get it to you at the end of devotional time. I hope you'll look at this, and the main thing I want you to see is there are multiple words. There's 2 pages worth of words used in the New Testament that deal with sin. And so these pages are given as an indication to show you these are the different words that deal with sin. Most of those words are found, that occurring in the New Testament are found on that first page. Hamartia found 174 times. And what I've done for you is I've given you the words, and I've given you the definition, the Thayer definition of what that word means. And I've given you other possible translations, how that's translated. You can see at the top that these are translated in the King James Version. Sin, sins, sin, sinneth, sinner, sinful. And you see that there. And you can also tell by this that what I've done is I've color-coded it. And when you get past those first 2 pages, you're going to enter the section where you're going to be able to read, and you can sit down and just read this. If you read through this document, you'll read every verse in the New Testament that contains the word sin. It may not say sin. It may say trespass. It may say offense. It may say fault. It may say stumble. But all of these Greek words that are translated sin are in this section. So when you read through this, you're going to see what they are. And by the color, if you set these sheets beside what you're reading, by the color, you're going to know what word is being used in that passage. So that on the first page there under the word sin, and these pages are broken up into the way that the word is translated in the New Testament. So the word sin has several pages where In our English Bible, it says sin. And then you got another section where in our English Bible, it says sins. And you can go on through, and you'll see as you go, there's more and more segments and for the way that it's translated in our English Bible, because we don't read Greek. So as you read through, for instance, on that first page, you'll see in red John 8:7. This occurs only one time in the entire New Testament, this word. And so when you look at that, it says what? Sinless, both one who has not sinned and one who cannot sin. So when you read that, it says, so when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto him, he that is without sin. The understanding of the meaning there is what? One who does not have sin and cannot sin. Sometimes people will use this verse against you and say, well, Jesus said he who does not have sin can cast the first stone. Yes, but what did he mean when he said that? He didn't mean someone who's never sinned before. He meant someone who does not have sin and cannot sin. He said the perfect man can cast the first stone. He who does not have sin and cannot sin among you, let him cast the first stone at her. And so this is the introduction to our class, which is sin in the New Testament. I want us to look over these words. Do we have somebody who can be our timekeeper? Because we've got to get out of here at 7:35. And we will not hear a bell over here. Is somebody who's up close? John? Okay. John has no problem interrupting me, so he can be our timekeeper. When we look at this, hamartia occurs 174 times. If you kind of just flip through the pages of the booklet that you have, you're going to see how much of it is blue. A lot of this is blue. This is your most common word for sin in the New Testament. And watch what it says. That which is done wrong, committed or resultant sin, an offense, a violation of divine divine law in thought or in act. This is your standard word for sin in the New Testament. Hamartia. And then you get to this word hamartolos, and you can tell these are similar words. They have the same base, but what does it say? This is someone who is devoted to sin. When you're reading through this and you get to a brown section, you're going to know this is someone devoted to sin. This is a sinner, not free from sin, preeminently sinful, especially wicked. This is why sometimes you'll hear people say, I'm not a sinner anymore. I've been saved. I'm a Christian. I'm not a sinner. Some people will refer to Christians as sinners, and some people will say, no, don't call me a sinner. I'm saved. I'm a Christian. I'm not a sinner anymore. And there can be a verbal dispute. The one person is talking about hamartia. They mean sometimes I commit a sin, right? The other person is saying, no, they're in this concept of hamartolos. I'm not devoted to sin. It's not my standard practice. And so we can see the difference between those two words. Look at hamartano. By the way, I don't have a Greek degree, so don't judge my pronunciation as the absolute rule of law. We can have a Greek guy get up here and give us exact pronunciations, maybe one of these second years. But I'm going to do the best I can with this. Our most important thing, and the reason it's color-coded, is you don't have to know how to pronounce the Greek word or even read it on this page. You just have to know that green means this definition. So what does it say? This is a failing to hit the mark, which is something we are used to, and sometimes in sermon illustrations and Bible classes, people will actually say, what is sin? It's missing the mark. Well, there's actually a Greek word that Thayer defines as failing to miss the mark that's different from hamartia, which is that instance of sin. That failing to hit the mark is translated trespass, offend, and faults. And so when I'm looking at the green, I understand that concept. Paraptoma, to fall around or beside. And this is interesting because we have the word parable, parabole, to cast beside. This is para and toma meaning to fall. This is to fall beside. This particular word makes me think about 1 John chapter 1 when he talks about if you walk in the light as he is in the light. And people say, but what if you stumble? You're going to make mistakes. The concept, though, of falling down beside, falling to the wayside, is found here in this passage. And you can see this is translated several different ways. Trespasses, offense, to fall, a fault, faults. And then you have in black hamartima, collectively a complex or aggregate of sins committed either by a single person or by many. So this is collective. It only occurs 4 times. This one's harder to say. Pro amartano, to sin before, occurs 2 times, and then what we've already looked at previously, the red, only occurs 1 time. I hope you will take time this week. It's a few pages. I hope you'll take time this week to take this packet and just to read through and read your way all the way through it. You can pay attention to the colors and think about what the implication is, or you could ignore the colors and simply say, I'm just going to read all the passages in the New Testament about sin. But the beauty of that is that if each of us will simply take this and read through, then next week when we come together, everyone here will have read every verse in the New Testament that has to do with our subject, which is sin. Because our purpose in this class is to take sin seriously. And if we read through every verse in the New Testament that deals with sin, and especially if I come across one and I say, man, what is that talking about? Well, I got my Bible sitting here, I can flip over and I can say, in the context, I'd like to see what this is dealing with. And I flip over to that passage and I read through it. I'm not ready to discuss this taking sin seriously until I'm ready to come to terms with what sin really is and what sin really does. I had a dear friend when I was in the school of preaching he loved the Psalms and he would read the Psalms a lot. And one of the things that he pointed out to me, we were talking about teens and youth work, and he said, you know why teens go astray? And I said, no, you tell me. And he said, it's not because they don't love God. He said, you talk to them, you bring them to a youth retreat, they'll talk about how much they love God. He said, kids mess up because they don't hate sin. And he talked about Psalm 119. You just read through Psalm 119 and David's affection for the law of God, but also something that David says, and frankly throughout the Psalms, is, what does David say? I hate every what? I hate every false way. What we got to grasp in this class, you can have a class on loving God, and that's good. But what we have to understand in this class is what? We assume that those here love God. Now we ask this question, do we understand that the necessary reaction to loving God and to loving His Word is that I have to hate sin? It's not enough for me to recognize there is sin. It's not enough for me to be like, well, yeah, I understand some things are sinful. No, I have to hate it. I will not hate it if it's analogous. I will not hate it if it's this higher concept that I put up here and say, yeah, sometimes people sin. I will not hate it if I try to negotiate with it. What do we do with sin? And that's how I want to close tonight. What do we normally do with sin? I've given you the information here. We're all going to read through this and we're going to look at sin, what it is and what it does in the New Testament. But I want to ask this question. What do we do with sin as a practice? From a starting point going into this class, if we ask ourselves this question, on my personal sins, when I sin, do I have pet sins? What do I do with sins internally, me? When I see sin in my brothers and sisters in Christ, what do I do with that? What do we do with that? Realistically, what do we do? We won't even get into the world. Let's just talk about us. What do we do? We try to keep it out of our lives. That's the genuine hope, right? When I see sin, what do I do? Personally, what do I do with sin? Avoid it, right? I don't believe you though. That's true that's true for some godly people that we can follow their example. I remember a brother told me the other day that Brother Garland Elkins one time was in class and they were talking about sin, and he said, you don't have to sin all the time. And he said, Brother Elkins said, it was some month, maybe February, March. Brother Elkins said, I don't know of a sin I've committed this year. That's a mature Christian. He didn't say I haven't sinned. He said, but I don't know of one. I have not willfully sinned this year. I've not gone and said, here is a sin, I'm committing it. That is a strong Christian. That is what we should be striving toward. What? Getting it out of our lives. But let me ask you this question. When you see that movie When you see that movie and it's being put up on the screen and you say, I can't think of the name of the trailer. When you see that movie trailer and you know that is not going to be appropriate for me to go and watch as a Christian. It doesn't hit everybody, but it's going to hit a few of us, right? When you have that person walk up to you and say, have you heard what she did? Do you know what he said? When you're at work and you can cut a corner and frankly nobody's going to know, but you can cut a corner. When you're in class, got a lot of students in here, and you could glance down and see that page. Nobody's going to know. What do we do with sin? Hopefully, we try to keep it out of our lives. But the question is, sometimes, do we bargain with sin? Do we rationalize? I heard it said rationalize. Do we rationalize? Have you ever reasoned it this way? Yeah, I mess up over here and I do this. But look at all the good things that I work hard. I'm at church every Sunday. I go to Bible class. So I do this one thing. Or how about this one? We turn sins into scruples. Right? Right? I heard a wise brother say this at the youth day. He said, scruples only ever restrict, they never release. Meaning what? What a popular thing, and I don't know about older members, but younger members of the church, what a popular thing to do is middle age and younger. I don't know about the older ones. Maybe y'all probably haven't been down this road. Maybe you're wiser than this. But what we like to do is this. We like to say, well, this action's sinful. Well, I think that's just a scruple, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. That's not how scruples work. We're going to talk about that in this course. Do we rationalize sin? Do we scrupleize sin? Well, it's sinful to go do this. It's sinful to gossip. Well, I don't really view this as gossip. I think that's just a scruple. What do we do with sin? You tell me. Let me ask you this. When you see someone else in sin, what's the common thing that we can do when we see someone else in sin? What are some common things we could do? There's what we should do, and there's what we could do, and those could be, it depends on you, right? That could be in there. But what's something you see people doing? Garrett, what do you see people do when they see someone else in sin? Ignore it, right? Let me act like I didn't see that. Let me act like I didn't hear that. Why? Why would we ignore if we see a brother or sister sin? Why would we ignore that? Don't have to deal with it. It's much easier, right? That's awkward when you go to somebody. What's another reason you might ignore it when you see someone else sin? You either have the same problem or you have your own problem and you say, who am I to say something to them? I've got this sin. Or maybe I've got the same sin. Who knows? What? My own sins dull my heart to the seriousness of sin that is in this other brother or sister. What did the scriptures say about that if that's the situation? You know, when the Lord said, if you see someone else sinning and you've got sin, just don't worry about it. What did he say? Go to him. And what does he say? If you've got a problem, what? Get what? Get the beam out of your eye. He doesn't say do nothing. He doesn't say, well, you're worthless, so go away. He says, get the beam out of your eye, and then what? Then you can see clearly to get the mote out of his eye. Not ignore it, not walk away from it. Yes, ma'am. It's 7:36. So what do we do when we see it 7:36? Do we just let Matthew keep going, or do we speak up and say, Matthew, it's 7:36. You need to do righteously and let us go. All right, let's head over. If you don't have one of these, Garrett,